What better film to talk about during Pride Month than 2008's Milk?
My name is Harvey Milk, and I'm here to recruit you.
And if you're one of the very, very few people who haven't seen this movie already, it is about the famous politician Harvey Milk. He was famous because he was the first openly gay elected public official, I think, in the United States. And this is one of those movies that has transcended the gay cinema genre and has gone mainstream, partly because there are some very big stars in this film. Sean Penn is the lead, and there's James Franco, Josh Brolin. It is just one of those big movies like Brokeback Mountain that a lot of people who don't watch regular gay movies know about. And I think this movie is deeper than just a typical biopic. What happens in the film is that they go more in depth to this person's life, so it doesn't have some of those biopic tropes. Yes, they do kind of go about some big moments that happen in his life, but it doesn't have that highlight reel feel. Some of those biopics, some of the problems with them is that they don't feel like you're actually getting to know the person that they're talking about. But here, they do a great job in actually dwelling in the minutia and details of his life, so you feel like you have a deeper understanding of the person, of the man. Now, this film is directed by Gus Van Sant, and Van Sant is a filmmaker that I haven't made directly a video about. This is one of the first times that I've actually talked directly about a movie he's made, but I have made parodies about his films. And he is one of the great American filmmakers. And even though he's an openly gay man, not all of his movies deal with gay characters. But this one here is a great example of him dealing directly in that world, but on a mainstream level. And what's really special about Gus Van Sant's films is that he does a mixture of like arty films, films which much more deeper thought or experimental stuff. And then he also has this thing where he does really mainstream movies, things like Good Will Hunting. And I feel like Milk is the amalgam of both of those worlds. They have this layer of artistry on top of it, but it's a very digestible commercial film. And what's great about Van Sant, along with someone like Ang Lee, who did Brokeback Mountain, is that he doesn't really impose too much of his directorial touches in this movie. He kind of just lets things play out, and great examples of that is that he holds shots and he lets things play out in wide shots and just watch things as they unfold, because you don't really want to impose too much of a directorial stamp on something that really happened. You could do it, but I think his approach in doing it that way was the smart move. Sean Penn won the Academy Award for this film, and I think it's very well deserved. It is a Daniel Day-Lewis level performance, and if you watch a lot of interviews with Harvey Milk, you can see how much he really does channel the man. It is kind of scary. And I can't really think of anybody else who would have done a better job. And funny enough, I believe I read on IMDb that Gus Van Sant, he had been wanting to do this project for a long time. And there are various other actors that were rumored to play the part. I believe Robin Williams was one of them, and Daniel Day-Lewis himself. But I think ultimately the decision to cast Penn was a genius move, because not only does Penn deliver in his performance, but he really does look like Harvey in a lot of ways. A lot of this stuff happened historically in the San Francisco Bay Area, and that is where I grew up. There's an area of San Francisco, a street, a neighborhood called the Castro, and a lot of these events happened there. And in the film, from what I've read, that they've shot a lot of it in the Castro street, and they even used the real apartment that Harvey Milk lived in. And there's a sense of authenticity throughout because of that. And I don't think you would have gotten the same effect had they just, filmed it on a green screen. And the script from Dustin Lance Blanc, who went on to win the Academy Award, does do a great job just going over everything. And I'm not sure if it was in the screenplay or if this was a directorial touch by Gus Van Sant, but I love the way that the movie incorporates historical documentary elements into the real footage. Something similar that a film that I reviewed on here called The Trip does. It's kind of an educational experience while also having it not be purely a documentary. There is another great documentary on the same subject that came out years before called The Times of Harvey Milk. And that's just a kind of a straightforward documentary look at his life, which is also worth watching. There's a lot of elements in the story that could have been very melodramatic and over the top, especially I'm not spoiling it, even though it's a thing that happens in real life. There is a very tragic thing that happens in the film. In the wrong hands, this type of event could have been very melodramatic and over the top. But Van Sant knows how to hold things back and not fall too much into the melodrama, even though there's nothing wrong with melodrama, but there's a time and a place for it. And I don't think that would have been appropriate in this film. And he does hold back and not making it too overly sentimental. And in a lot of ways, that makes it even more tragic because of how real that it feels when the violence does happen. This film is almost the perfect example of the best movie to watch during Pride, because not only is it talking about gay rights and how far we've come in the United States on that front, but there's this sense of optimism. Harvey himself talked about hope and giving people hope and coming out and just being seen. This film does encapsulate that, and every time you watch it, you feel this camaraderie around the gay rights movement or just being a part of the community. And that, to me, is what Pride feels like. I remember my first Pride that I ever went to. I went completely alone, and I just wanted to be part of the camaraderie of everything and just see what it was like. And I was not disappointed. I went there and everybody in rainbows and this just joyous thing. Yes, there's crazy people there that show up, but it was great, even though I was alone. But I remember going back on the public transportation, and this elderly gay man starts a conversation with me, and he asks me how many prides I had been to, and I told him that it was my first one. And then he proceeds to tell me that he couldn't even remember how many prides he'd been to, but he remembered that he had been at one of the very first prides, and that he not only voted for Harvey Milk, but that he got to meet him. And I couldn't think of a better way to end my first Pride with that story and meeting that man. What do you think about Pride? Is it a time that you like to think about how far we've come as a society, or is it a time just to reflect back on being happy about who you are? Does it even matter to you at all? I'm curious to know.